Right on. I'm just flicking on my recorder here. How are you feeling anyway? Tell me how it's going.
Well, getting a little tired, I guess. We
Yeah.
left July 4th
Oh, I was just gonna
from
ask.
Ontario
Wow.
and around Barrie area, and then first night I had to speak at University of Algoma in Sault Ste. Marie, and we stopped to see Christy Belcourt and Isaac Murdoch at their culture and language camp.
Oh.
You know, they're doing this culture and language camp outside of funding of the government. They're doing their own thing, raising money. They have an art collective that kind of helps support, but they've got other people there, and they're promoting language immersion, and they're governing themselves in the camp with the people there by their own Anishinaabe customary system. They have a lodge there,
Nice.
a traditional lodge.
Where's that place?
Huh?
Where is that place?
It's an hour and a half east of Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario. Right by Serpent River, because Isaac is from Serpent River. But they're on the traditional territory, I guess what Ontario would say is Crown land. So they've been tussling a bit over that issue. But so far, Doug Ford's in there now, so I don't know what he's going to do, but under wind, they didn't really push them. We stopped in there to see what was going on, the buildings that they've built. They're building the homes. And like I say, they have a lodge set up. It's a long, oval-shaped structure, which is covered with canvas or tarp or something. It almost looks like a longhouse, except it's used for meetings and ceremonies. But they do a lot of stuff there. So that's what we've been doing across the country, is kind of talking to the people that are out there doing stuff without waiting for the government. They give them a check or something, and trying to revive their identity. And exercise self-determination in their own ways. And then I spoke at, we had to hustle down, couldn't stay there that long because I had to hustle to the university to talk. And I was talking to students, and some chiefs were in there, and counselors and elders, so it was a mixed crowd. It was good. But, I stayed around and met with chief and councils there and picked up some votes there, and moved on up to Thunder Bay, and stayed with a friend there, and then we moved up to Winnipeg. Didn't do much in Manitoba because there's two candidates from Manitoba, and I was told that the chiefs are all pretty much committed to one of the two, and it's only a second ballot discussion for me, so I figured I can have that discussion in Vancouver because they're all going to show up there next week. And then we went through Saskatchewan. That's where my wife's from. Their relatives there, and I spoke to one chief and council there at Cowes's, and then we went to Regina to that Justice for Youth camp, Justice for Stolen Youth camp, where they're raising the issues about child apprehension and stuff. And they're actually doing stuff about it too. They're not just talking about it. They're helping families out in the Regina area to to keep their kids and stuff.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and I missed Batchewana. We went to Batchewana after Sault Ste. Marie. That's about a 5-hour drive heading west from Sault Ste. Marie. And not Batchewana, Pick River. And I've done some advisory work with them before, so I know them. But I went up there and I spoke at a powwow that they were having, and while I was there, this policeman, I think his name, he's from Curve Lake, an Indian policeman, Kevin Redsky, I think his name is. He's doing a walk for mental health, youth mental health. And when I got there, he had walked 11 kilometers with members of the community and the chief into the powwow from the highway. And so he spoke about what, his movement was about. And he was saying, when we've been videoing and taking pictures of people, putting this up on my Facebook page, so that people can kind of see what the campaign trail is like for me. And so he's on video talking about it. We videoed Robin Pitawanakwat, I think, from the Regina camp. And last I saw, she had like thousands of views of her video.
Right on.
Because she explained the background to the camp and what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it met with more people than chiefs. Most candidates chase chiefs around, and I have done some of that. And I have gotten some support from Ontario and Alberta. I was in Alberta twice. But I've also been talking to people. And then, of course, in BC, I'm working the interior because this is where I used to work.
Yeah.
But there are some chiefs supporting Sheila.
Yeah.
Some are probably going to support Perry. I know which ones. It's always usually the ones that follow the money and see how can we get the money out of Ottawa, right? What do we have to do?
Yeah.
You probably know who some of those chiefs are, too.
I probably do.
And I think we're going to Stallion Country tomorrow. I've been talking to Gary and John, and we wanted to see if we get some chiefs and even people together for me to come and talk about why I'm running and what the issues are.
Oh, nice.
So we're in Kamloops tonight, but we might head over to Lillooet tomorrow or somewhere around there. I'm waiting to hear back.
It would be. It would sure be great if you could do that. I remember that's the first time I met you was in Lillooet when you and Arthur came and did the speaking tour about the BC Treaty Commission.
Yeah, and that was after the Interior Line stuff. Art was freer to talk then when he didn't have a political position, elected political position.
Yeah.
He was more open about what he could say then, and that's the way I felt too. But that's why I'm calling my campaign "Truth Before Reconciliation" right now. I think there's some things that need to be said, and Trudeau's trying to run away with this Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. And I don't think that's enough to deal with the racism and colonialism in the country. And of course, the land is one of the big truths that we haven't dealt with yet. So let's not talk about reconciliation with program service dollars under the Indian Act,
No doubt.
Although there's a lot of chiefs chasing that, I don't think. I've been tracking. Well, you've probably seen some of the things I've said. I've been tracking the Trudeau government. And I don't. I know he's wearing a mask. He's just like his father.
Yeah, right on. I want to ask you a little bit about. I want you to talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been reading and listening to your interviews that you've done in the last couple of weeks here. And you made this comment saying that the rights implementation process is Trudeau perpetrating a fraud, and you said that the legislation, if it passes in the fall, is going to affect us for generations to come. And I wanted you to explain that comment a bit more, if you could.
Well, okay. Firstly, he ran on a platform promising a nation-nation relationship, a new reconciliation process, lifting the 2% cap on programs and services, doing the murdered and missing woman inquiry, doing a law and policy review to decolonize Canada's laws. Right? Those are some of the big promises.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he started to co-opt our terminology, because he had his own meanings to that. And I would say he got them from Jody Wilson-Raybould. She's behind all this, because they're using her governance toolkit as the basis of this framework for recognition and implementation. So they're using that Self-Government Recognition Act that her and Jerry St. Germain, Senator St. Germain, worked on in 2012. And she admits it in a McLean's article, I think March 1st. Jody's Plan to Save Canada, I think the title is.
Oh.
But in there she admits that Paul Martin came and saw her, looked at her governance toolkit that her husband and her developed, probably more her husband than her. Tim wrote, and that's where she talks about the self-government recognition legislation, and that's the way to go, she said. So in the McLean's article, she says Paul Martin came saw her speak about that, took a copy of it. It's an 800-page tome that her husband and her did, and but all within the lines of federal policy, right? Nothing outside. There's no mention of historic treaties, no mention of international law, none of that, right? If you go through that 800 pages, I challenge you to find anything on that.
Yeah, I've had to look at that. Yeah, didn't they write that up before she became the AFN regional chief in BC?
No, well, she might have, but the version I saw was while she was AFN regional chief.
Okay, maybe she had an earlier version that I saw, but yeah.
Could be. All I know is that it's available online. If you type in AFN BC Governance Toolkit, it'll pop up. And you can download it for your reading pleasure.
Yeah. Well, now, and anyway, it's just so she sort of made this proposal, and it's basically just a how to make your Indian band work in Canada. That's what I get out of her governance toolkit. It has nothing to do with land and self-determination or reparation. And what you're saying is that Trudeau went on a platform promising all these things, and now he's found the the perfect token Indian proposal, which is to just go along with everything under Bill C-45, the way that the federal government has always been trying to assimilate and streamline First Nation governance into municipalities.
Well, yeah, that's what they're trying to do, and but the framework that he's talking about, right? He said it's a recognition of implementation of rights framework. In a nutshell, what I'm saying is that they're going to define those rights in legislation this fall, and they're going to use this new fiscal policy to coerce First Nations acceptance of their definition of the rights. And in fact, the minister, Carolyn Bennett, well, let's back up. They issued 10 principles on Indigenous relationships. Those are basically to recolonize First Nations because it sets out, the doctrine of discovery, the Constitution Act 1867, federal provincial laws in order to the government dominate. There's no Indigenous jurisdiction recognized there. They're reinforcing the 30 years of jurisprudence of Supreme Court decisions interpreting Section 35, so everything can be justifiably infringed for projects that are important to them, like pipelines.
Yes, because absolutely, because the Delgamuukw decision told us that they can justify their infringement of any Aboriginal rights, and so if they continue to interpret Section 35 of the Constitution Act as saying that those Aboriginal rights aren't defined, whatever existing rights they are, we don't know what they are, and it's up to the courts to define them one by one. That's the problem with that.
Unless they legislate them, and that's what they're going to do.
Oh, okay.
They're going to use their 9124 authority to pass legislation to interpret Section 35 Aboriginal treaty rights, and also to interpret the minimum standards set out in the UN Declaration.
Well, thank you very much for interpreting that for us, because I didn't get that out of it. I haven't looked at it.
Well, it hasn't been released yet, but what I'm saying is what you got to do is add up everything that they've done so far. They've issued these 10 principles that say that's going to guide the law and policy review and everything else that they're doing. And the 10 principles are very restrictive. It's going to be based on existing case law, so you know what the legal tests say. Burden of proof's on you, you have to meet it. So everything that they've been doing in their self-government and land claims policies, they're going to kind of wrap up in a new legislative framework. And they're going to use the fiscal policies, because there's two. Like I've been telling the chiefs, this is the other thing, is why are there two departments? I keep telling the chiefs, you need to ask why are there two departments. And they're dissolving the Department of Indian Affairs. And Indigenous Services is basically for 9124 on reserve programs, so that's Philpot. And then CERNA, well, it's now CER, I guess, because as of yesterday, they've taken Northern Affairs away from Crown Indigenous Relations. So Bennett's just handling that. So the Dene are on their own north of 60 in the Yukon and the NWT.
Oh, is that right?
And, well, yeah, they just announced that in the cabinet shuffle yesterday.
Wow.
They've taken Northern Affairs away, and it's just Crown Indigenous Relations now for Bennett.
Okay.
And she can't even handle that, so they've assigned an assistant deputy minister to go around with her everywhere, Joe Wild,
I see.
to explain everything. Anyway, so what I'm saying is DISC is for all the bands under the Indian Act, whether you're in treaty or non-treaty areas. CERNA, or SIR, as it is now, Crown Indigenous Relations, is for modern treaties, self-government agreements. And that's where they want to move all the Indian Act bands who aren't at a table or aren't settling at a table. They're going to pass legislation saying what's on the table, what's not on the table, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you what to negotiate, but they're going to lay out the menu. And Bennett's already called it enabling legislation. And the reason why she says that is because, you know, for bands under the Indian Act, they're considered non-self-governing groups unless you sign a self-government agreement or a modern treaty, or there's legislation that passes to say that you have some rights. Like the Anishinaabe Education Act that passed last December.
Okay, and so presumably, if you don't sign that, you also don't get any housing money or money to run the band.
Not as much.
So this
they'll starve you. They'll starve you into accepting these new arrangements.
Right.
And they're also saying it's going to be optional. But they also said the Fiscal Institutions Act was optional in 2004 or 5, whenever that passed. And now they're using those institutions, you know, to create national fiscal policy. You know, the First Nation, these 10-year grants they're talking about, you have to be certified by the First Nations Financial Management Board. Harold Callis group there out of Vancouver.
Right.
And Manny Jules is involved in a national tax working group, because under DISC, you're going to have contribution agreements, but they want to increase capacity for financial administrative management and community planning to get you fit to then move into a modern agreement.
Right.
Under that legislation.
And
then you'll be under transfer payments, and they're modifying the formula because the Yukon First Nations and others have said they're being chronically underfunded. And the government also suspended own source revenue for 3 years to say they can keep that until they sort out what the new fair funding formula, transfer payment formula will be.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where they want all the bands under DISC to move to eventually. DISC will dissolve them.
Okay, I just want you to say for me, what does DISC stand for?
Department of Indigenous Services Canada.
Okay, that's the new one. Okay, fine. Because I remember a different DISC, the Delgamuukw Implementation Steering Committee, but we won't go there right now.
Yeah, I know. It galls me that they're using the acronym. Yes.
Yeah, me too. Now, I just want to say this back to you again, and I'd see if I'm getting what you're saying here. The issue with the interpretation of the Constitution Act in 1982, and when you refer to them compiling 30 years of Supreme Court case decisions and now legislating them, I just want to clarify that the problem with that is the Supreme Court of Canada has never properly recognized the land rights and the rights to autonomy and self-determination as actually stated in the Constitution as the existing Aboriginal rights, because that's what the existing Aboriginal rights are before you have a treaty, is that they own their own land, they own their own stuff, they take charge of their own people, and that has never, been acknowledged in Canada, and certainly not by a court. So, just let me finish what I'm trying to say. So if they legislate these the rights the way they want to define them, and in the limited manner in which the Supreme Court has recognized them, and on top of that, that they can all be infringed upon, according to the Supreme Court of Canada, if they legislate that into a bundle, then they're going to try to say that the authority for having an Aboriginal right comes from Canadian law. And that's the bit that, that's just the salt on the pudding. I don't know what to call that. But am I getting you with what...
I'd say that's about right. I mean, I don't know if you looked at the Yellowhead Institute's critique of this stuff.
No.
They issued a report about a month ago.
Okay.
And that's basically what they're saying, too, is they're saying, it's a modified status quo that's being offered by Trudeau with this framework. It's going to be a municipal model of government, and they're not coming up with new money. And it's going to be on reserve, so it's not going to involve land, and it's not going to involve jurisdiction off reserve.
Right. Right. And
so,
yeah.
So, they are going to legislate over Indians and lands reserved for Indians.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And use 9124 to do that. And then they're going to interpret Aboriginal treaty rights as to what's on the table to negotiate and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, they're going to interpret a Canadian definition of the UN Declaration. Mm-hmm. They've already said they were going to do that, and that's what Jody's doing.
Yeah, and I read that you posted
Warnick,
that.
Warnick is behind all this too, because he was deputy minister for Harper for 10 years.
Who are we talking about?
He's now the target. Michael Warnick.
Okay, I don't know who that is, but all right.
You don't know who he is?
No, I don't.
Well, look up, Google my name and APTN, and you'll find an opinion piece I wrote when he was appointed in January 2016. Okay. And I lay out all the, some of the highlights of the things he did while he was deputy minister of Indian Affairs.
Okay.
And you'll see why, in my view, his fingerprints are all over this national plan that they're rolling out.
And you've compared this national plan to the white paper policy from 1969. So just, I can see your point.
The objectives of it, yeah.
I can see your point, but just tell us exactly why it's the same.
Well, basically converting bans into municipalities and reserves into private property has been one of the objectives of the white paper right from the beginning.
Yep.
And that's what everything I see that the Trudeau government's doing, the documentation that I see, is all supporting that that's what the legislation is going to promote when it's introduced.
Yeah.
Like I said, you just look at the 10 principles, you look at them coming up with these 2 new departments, you look at the fiscal policies. The other piece you can look at is the reconciliation chapter in Budget 2018, because that tells you how they're going to spend for the next 5 years. Because I know Perry Bellegarde is saying, how can we critique it? It hasn't been introduced in Parliament yet. Well, that's the thing that I would answer is say, well, we can see what they've done for the past 2.5 years and the actions they've taken that I just laid out. And then look at how they're going to spend money for the next 5 years. And that shows you what their plan is on this, on implementing this Recognition Act.
Yeah, and it's sort of
which I understand they have about $50 million for. So.
Right. And this whole process, the way you're describing it, like that you have to kind of like look at their shadow as it falls into the future in terms of what they're going to do, and it really precludes the possibility of Canada suggesting that they have in any way consulted with any of the Indigenous peoples on this legislation that is going to so dramatically affect them, and that kind of consultation, which is not exactly the peak of human rights law, but that consultation is required in as a basic standard in relations between states and Indigenous peoples, and that's been hammered out and spelled out in the UN treaty bodies that have reviewed Canada, and in the Indigenous peoples forums, the 5 special forums for Indigenous peoples. So do you want to comment on that?
Well, I guess my comment would be that, most chiefs and councils go to Ottawa. They don't go to the UN. And they go to Ottawa for money. And the money, to go to court to meet these, let's say you want to do a constitutional challenge.
A constitutional what?
A constitutional challenge.
Oh, good. Okay, sorry, you just patched out.
Say the legislation's unconstitutional because it's violating your Aboriginal treaty rights.
Mm-hmm.
The burden of proof is going to be on you to prove that. Just like, if you say you have Aboriginal title, the burden of proof is on you to prove it. And then, even if you can, you either got to seek a court declaration or negotiate under comprehensive claims policy. That's what the Chocolton decision says. You got 2 choices,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to legislate that, and that's the framework. It's enabling legislation, so that means, they're saying basically you have no rights unless, you're enabled under that legislation through a self-government agreement, some kind of land claims agreement, or legislation, like sectoral legislation, like they did for the Education Act for Anishinaabe, or for the Mi'kmaq. They did it for the Mi'kmaq out east too in Nova Scotia. They called that sectoral agreements.
Yeah. Okay.
Where you just negotiate basically in one program area, like education or health.
Yes.
Or child welfare.
And
provinces have a veto in anything in their areas of jurisdiction under the inherent right policy from 1995, because that's basically what they're using.
Right, and I noticed that, and also I just want to add here that the comprehensive claims policy that that you're referring to, and the fact that that is everybody's option, even if you have fulfilled the burden of proof and shown that you have Aboriginal title, your only options are to negotiate with the government under a policy which has the extinguishment of your rights as the final dead end. And you've remarked...
They call it modification, but it's the same thing here.
That's right. They call it modified rights, or they call it making certainty. And you've definitely talked about that. And this is what you get when you go to Ottawa.
But you can go to court and seek a declaration like the Chilcotin did of Aboriginal title.
Yes. And...
But who has the money to do that?
Well, nobody. But also, I thought that what you were just saying is that once you've got that, okay, you've got a declaration of Aboriginal title. How do you implement that? You can't, because there's no. I thought that you just said there's only two options. You can either negotiate an agreement and sell the Aboriginal title that you just proved you had, or what's the other option?
I said the option is you go to court, get a declaration, or you negotiate. You litigate or negotiate.
Right. And
if you litigate, you got to go the route of Chilcotin. And most groups can't afford the millions of dollars to collect the historical and cultural evidence to meet the legal test under Chilcotin and Diabo.
That's right.
To prove title. And then even if you do, look at what's happening to the Chilcotin. I'm sure they'd argue with me, but I would say that they're having difficulties implementing their decision. Because, I don't think, it's kind of like the reverse of what Barrier Lake did. Barrier Lake laid out a management plan, but didn't have the jurisdiction. They had to negotiate that when Quebec law came into the area, it would be modified. The Chilcotin went the other way and argued that they had Aboriginal title, but they didn't have a plan to manage the territory once they won title. You follow me?
I sure do.
And that's the difficulty they're having. And then the province comes along and says, "Oh, well, we have legislation and policy. We can help you develop a forest plan, or we can help you with a wildlife plan for moose management or whatever." Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know what the state of their negotiations are, but I have seen from the outset they've been having some problems.
Yeah.
But then anyways, it's compounded by the fact that, if you're talking about international human rights law applying to Indigenous rights on top of that, this is where it gets complicated, because Canada's manipulating they're domesticating everything. And how do you force Canada to adhere to the minimum standards? Because I don't call the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples principles. I call them minimum standards, because that's what you need to measure against what they're doing domestically.
Yeah.
And that's why I say in Articles 26 through 29, Trudeau's not even talking about lands, territories, and resources. He's only talking about programs and services on reserve. But yet he's going around saying, well, we're going to implement the UN Declaration. But then they manipulate the hell out of what they mean by that, and they come up with their own definition.
Yeah.
And Jody's part of that too, as a justice minister. Right?
Yeah.
So I didn't finish. I said it's Jody, it's Michael Warnick, it's Jerry Butts there at PMO, and it's the Prime Minister himself are the ones who are implementing this plan. And they're just using Philpott to keep the lid on for the program, on-reserve program stuff. And Bennett, they're using going around talking about new relationships and agreements. Aided and abetted by an assistant deputy minister. So, I've talked about termination tables.
Yeah.
the comprehensive claims tables and self-government tables.
Yeah.
Well, they've come along and created a new category of table called the Recognition and Self-Determination Table.
Oh.
They've got 60 of them. They're listed on the website. At first, they were secret. They didn't say who they were talking to. Now they're saying who they're talking to, but they're not saying what they're talking about. But with the First Nations, for example, the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council is listed there, and they have other tables listed. But what they are saying is the outcome of those discussions are going to feed into this Recognition Act they're planning on introducing this fall. So they're using those talks basically to frame what's on the table and what's not on the table for negotiation, like they did with the Inherent Right Policy in 1995. So they're defining self-determination the same way they defined the inherent right back in the 90s under the Regime.
Yep. And let's just talk a little bit about why that's a problem, because it's not, Canada does not have the right to define how First Nations and Aboriginal groups govern themselves and what they do on their own lands. So,
well, you can say that, but they've got hundreds of bands, right, that have been negotiating self-government and modern treaties, and they haven't settled, mind you.
Yeah.
But they were negotiating under the preconditions that those policies have.
Well, that's right.
And now you have the Land Claims Agreement Coalition, which is separate from AFN, which is the 30 or 40 groups that have signed these modern treaties to have their own organization now, because the government hasn't been implementing them either.
Right.
Same with historic treaties.
Well, and the thing is, you can compare that to what happened in British Columbia over 100 years ago, when the alliances and all the nations got together and they wanted to, and Laurier was here, and they wanted Laurier to address and bring up the fact of the land question and the fact that they still owned it and they still didn't have a treaty, and BC and all the colonizers were still coming in and taking everything.
You saw what they did with that. They amended the Indian Act in 1927-28, making it illegal to hire lawyers and do any of that.
That's exactly right. That's how they dealt with that, because in 1926, that's when they finally got their hearing with the Joint Committee. But the thing is, like when they made that proposal and said, we want an inquiry, we want a hearing into the land question, the Canadian government, such as it was, came back to them with a proposal that they first of all had to sign away any rights that inquiry might find that they had before they would allow their courts to hold an inquiry into the land question. And I would say that that's pretty much what's happening when you agree to go and negotiate under the Comprehensive Claims Policy. You can go ahead and read that policy. The only outcome of it is that you're going to end up a municipality, a Canadian municipality, fully assimilated, and at the mercy of their budgets from year to year as to where your money's coming from. Yeah.
And the other thing is, and I was telling this to Nisqually today, that Chief and Counsel is, in 1973 when Pierre Elliott Trudeau announced the land claims policy, he put it in the Constitution because when they amended the Constitution in '83, they added Section 35.3, which says, for greater certainty, any land claim settlement that has been settled or may be settled are treaties within the meaning of 35.1. So that word land claim settlement, which came from the 73 policy, is entrenched in the Constitution now. So now you have modern treaties entrenched in there. It's being different than historic treaties.
Yes, right.
And modern treaties are treated, even though they haven't implemented them, they've paid more lip service to them than they have historic treaties, about the spirit and intent of those. And that's what the Prairie Treaty chiefs are pissed off about, and people, is that they don't feel that their treaties are being given any recognition or respect by this government or previous governments, and that's true.
No, it certainly doesn't seem like it. No. Look,
and they don't interpret their treaties as saying the extinguished title. They don't accept that wording.
No.
But anyway, that's the problem we have now, is the term land claim is built into the Constitution. And that's what their policies are based on. So if we're really talking about decolonizing laws, that's where we really have to talk about busting open the Constitution at some point. But also figuring out what to do on the interim. Plus, there's Article 46 in the UN Declaration, which says, you can't challenge the sovereignty of the state or its territorial integrity.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're going to do something, you're going to have to argue about redrawing the map of Canada the way it is. But they're redrawing it against us. Like I said, they just took Northern Affairs away because they're entrenching the north of 60 line from the south of 60 line. And that's because those groups that signed water treaties up there went for public governments and devolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
The devolution of the territorial governments.
Yeah, in the Nunavut agreement.
They stated that when they signed those agreements at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. That's the Yukon Agreement and the Nunavut Agreement, and is there more? Not James Bay.
And the Dene ones.
Okay, yeah.
Because the Dene didn't sign one big Dene Nation agreement; they broke it to pieces. And like not the Decho, trying to think of a Saw-2 maybe. Yeah, Saw-2, and there's other groups up there that have settled.
It's interesting the way you make that picture for us. It's like. They're trying to push the map one way and draw it their way, and basically because of Article 46, is that in the UN Charter or in the UNDRIP that says?
It's in the UNDRIP.
Yeah, it's in the Charter too, I think, but basically says that you can't threaten the territorial integrity of any states. And what you're saying is that you just really need to unpack the Constitution and basically look at what is the territorial integrity of this state. And
that's
also
that's what Art and I had discussed because my understanding is when the UN Declaration was being negotiated at the last minute, Ed John and others came in and agreed to that article.
Yeah,
there was a few sellouts from different countries, and I guess I have a book about it, but I've never read the book yet.
Mm-hmm.
But be that as it may, that's in there, and that has to be dealt with. And the way Art and I talked about it was, well, maybe we can't say that you can challenge all of Canada, but we can certainly challenge the existing map.
That's
and
right.
say that has to be redrawn.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
the provincial lines and even the territorial lines. But we're not even thinking like that. This election that I'm running, and the whole reason I decided to run is I didn't see any other candidate talking about what the Trudeau government's doing to us and the long-term implications. Because if this legislation does pass, it's going to last for generations. It's almost like a new Indian Act, but, it's beyond that.
And it's a little scary because the struggle for rights, and particularly land rights, people have been losing that a lot, right, left and center. And for this to come on top of the way we are right now is really going to push us backwards big time, because nobody's ever really gained enough land rights to stand on, so to speak, and now it's like the rug's being pulled out from under.
Well, and that's, in a way, I guess that's how I see this election being framed for AFN, because Trudeau's election too. He wants Perry re-elected, or at least one of the other candidates that are going to go along with him.
Yeah.
And I would say all of them are variations of that theme, except me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I see that is the election being framed to basically being you either choose Ottawa or you choose the people,
And that's...
Because that's my platform's based on, is recognizing self-determination and land rights. I'm not just talking about programs and services on reserve, and that's what they're chasing. Yeah. They're chasing the $17 billion in new money that Trudeau's promised for programs and services.
That's right.
And Perry's saying re-elect me because I'll get more.
Oh, I see. And so that's his appeal, is that he'll get slightly more money.
Well, his appeal is I got you $17 million because he's taking credit for that.
Oh, I see.
And I can get you more to close the gap.
Who
meanwhile, the Auditor General just issued a report in May saying the government's not even measuring progress to close the gap.
No.
And he also concludes that he thinks under the bureaucratic culture that they're not capable of doing it. Because they've been told time and again to do it, and they haven't.
Yeah. So who is going to believe...
But yes, that's his panacea,
Yeah, but who's going to believe Perry Bellegarde when he says given the reality, given the history, given what the Auditor General said, and we know they're not measuring the gap and addressing how they're going to close it. They've never even talked about that. Who's going to believe Perry Bellegarde when he says he can get more money?
Well, I'm hearing probably Chiefs for Treaty 9, probably Treaty 3. Well, actually, no, I'm hearing they're going for Sheila. But there are chiefs out there that are going with Perry. I know there's some from Quebec. I know there's some right here in the Shuswap Nation.
Yeah.
There's some probably other than BC that are going to go for Perry, but there are also some that are going for Sheila.
Yeah.
And I think some going for me.
Well, I
don't know about Miles, you know.
No.
Although I hear Matthew Kuncombe and Ovid McCready and now Clarence Louis are all saying they're supporting Miles.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. They've been pals for a long time. But you know, the thing is that's a really old trick, Russell. You tell someone, if you go do this, I'll pay you money. Well, you know what? You go and do it, you get yourself in trouble, and then the money's not there. And what are you going to do about it? Who are you going to complain to? Why would you have done such a thing to get money? You know, it's just not going to happen. I can't believe...
The Chiefs like electing in a national groveler.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
You know, look at the past number of... like after Ovid, okay? Ovid was the last national chief I saw that fought with the government.
Yeah?
And he only did that the second term after he lost Charlottetown.
Yeah.
But after him was Phil Fontaine, Mr. Joint Initiative, you know.
Yeah.
And then after him was Matthew Kuncombe, whose group had already extinguished title. So they hooked up with the Summit, and he was hardly around. So he only lasted one term. And then Phil came back, and then Phil came back a second term. So he had 3 terms. And then after him came Atleo. And we saw with him his departure, and then comes Bellegarde. So the trend has been for chiefs to elect in chiefs, well, basically from the AFN executive into national chief, and they don't want them to have any real authority because under the charter, national chief has no inherent authority. They basically just want them to get money out of Ottawa flowing to the regions, right? To the communities.
Yeah,
program of service dollars.
When has that ever been successful? I don't think that's happened. I look at they put the lid on spending.
Perry says that there's historic levels of investment occurring right now with the $17 billion that the Trudeau government's promised. That's what he's running on.
And the difference there, and what you're saying, just to go back to how this started, the difference really is in what is the objective of the AFN leadership. Is it to put money in the bank accounts that fund these programs and services, which always result in poverty and disempowerment among the people, or
this is the thing I've been telling the people, Kerry.
Yeah.
When you're talking about AFN, it's not just this office sitting in Ottawa. It's the band offices, the organizations leading up to the office in Ottawa. But basically, AFN's like a national band office. It's all based on the Indian Act, the whole system. And AFN is the whole system. It's the whole band council system, the band office system. That's what it is. And, for many, they're just trying to figure out how to get Ottawa to keep going along. So the $17 billion is really to pay off the band office staff, the advisors, the lawyers, the chiefs and councils. So they're comfortable, but the people aren't getting their needs met. And half the people are living in cities, so they're not addressed because the government says, well, we're not responsible. We're not doing programs for them. They're provincial responsibilities. And although they say lip service, well, we respect our relatives in the urban areas, but we don't do anything about it because we're not funded to.
That's right. There's no money that goes to a band to support someone who lives in a city, off outside of the territory and outside of the band. That's right. So if the AFN really is the summit and the culmination of the Indian Act system, and I do realize that because it's the elected chiefs who comprise the AFN leadership. But I think that, so if you're...
But I would qualify that and say that there are some good chiefs that are trying to do the right thing.
Well, I didn't...
Not all just
well, they're stuck in... no, it's not their... No, it's not their fault they're stuck in the Indian Act, but that's what the AFN is. I'm not saying they're bad people. This is the Indian Act that is captured and enslaved the Indigenous people in Canada. That's the problem that we're talking about.
But the bureaucracy knows how to elevate the chiefs that they want, and promote them. I would say guys like Manny Jules and other so-called champions, they used to call them. They all got their reputation then because of their ability to get money out of the government. But it wasn't just that. It was the government was promoting them because they were promoting certain values that the government wanted to see promoted.
That's right. And so
like taxation.
Yeah. And Manny Jules was a big part of it.
For example. That's just an example.
It's just one example.
There are others.
Yeah, there's many. And when you talk about, well, anyway, let's not go that way. I wanted to ask you, so basically you're either going to Ottawa for programs or you're going home into the community, into the land, and taking care of the people. Now, what is a guy like you, if you get into the bureaucracy of the AFN in a leadership position, and you know that, and how are you going to turn that boat back towards the people and the land issue?
First thing I would do is I would let Trudeau know I'm putting the brakes on the legislation and saying we need to start from the ground up, not going on your schedule, meaning Trudeau's schedule. And the other thing I would do is say we have to restructure AFN and have a special assembly to rewrite the charter, and we need to do this as quickly as possible. And if Trudeau doesn't want to put the brakes on the legislation, then I would have to work with chiefs who support me and with the community people and to mobilize and hit the streets and probably hit a caravan to Ottawa or something to start stepping up the pressure like we had to do in the past.
So a civil movement.
I would be more of an activist. I would be a national advocate, not a national chief.
Right.
And I would be working with, like I say, chiefs who support me, and I do have chiefs across the country who are doing great things despite the Indian Act, and they are supporting me because they know we need a national plan and strategy of our own, which supports our own right of self-determination from the ground up, and that means we have to reorganize AFN, restructure it fundamentally, not tinkering with it. That's what Perry's talking about doing, and we need to change that relationship with Ottawa. In the end, I know we have to negotiate with the federal government, but they shouldn't be dictating the terms, and that's what's happening now.
Okay.
Perry's basically a cheerleader for them.
Yeah.
I think we need a professional arm's length relationship. I mean, that's what George Manuel had when he was president of NIB.
Yeah.
There was an NIB cabinet committee back in the 1970s. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know there was a cabinet committee for the NIB, no. National Indian Brotherhood.
Yeah, there was, and then George pulled out of it when Trudeau started trying to use it as a rubber stamp.
Right.
And Perry's got what they call bilateral mechanism, which is really a fancy way of saying an AFN cabinet committee that meets with the Prime Minister annually and with ministers quarterly and are implementing those MOUs. And it's basically this top-down approach where they're just using AFN to implement their plan. That's why I said to one reporter, I said they basically weaponized AFN against us and turned them on us. When the chiefs created the organization to hold Ottawa accountable and, to have them reporting on what they're doing on Aboriginal treaty rights. That's what it was set up to do for community chiefs. But
I think this is an interesting name, the term that you've used, the bilateral position. It sounds more like we could just use the word two-face.
No, it's called a bilateral mechanism, they call it.
Yeah, a bilateral mechanism. You turn one way and you have one face, you turn the other way and you're a government agent. That's amazing.
Well, I think they mean two sides, federal and AFN.
Yeah.
But I can see your point. English is, as we know, got double meanings.
Yeah, we know that way too well. Well, look, this is brilliant. You've covered some really important points here for us, and that's what you mean by them weaponizing the AFM. So it's basically that I wanted to ask you about that because you're showing now how.
I think I sent you the chart.
You sure did.
I think I sent you. Yeah. So I mean, you can see.
Yeah.
Now, what you're missing to interpret that chart is you're missing the vice chief portfolios and you're missing the chief's committees.
And the mandates and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically what that chart shows you is what the financial and human resource allocation are to support those committees and that who are basically implementing Trudeau's agenda.
Yeah.
Like there's one for human resources. Like I sit on one for Chiefs Committee on Lands, Territories and Resources. It used to be called Chiefs Committee on Claims, but the chiefs I work with changed the name of it to fit with the UN declaration terms, right? But that committee is not doing anything except it was working on specific claims process because they promised an independent claims process. It wasn't actually dealing with policy; it was dealing with process. And now the government's told them, well, we're going to hold off on dealing with that. That was the only thing that AFN had anything to do with in terms of trying to move on land issues, rights issues.
Gosh, and that's where it came from.
So that committee doesn't even have. Well, we don't even know if it's going to continue to be funded and have a future. But the ones that are active in AFN are the Chiefs Committee on Education, Chiefs Committee on Health, Chiefs Committee on Housing, Chiefs Committee on what else? Human Resources, which is the labor training funds, all that.
Right, and
so those are the committees that chiefs across the country are sitting on because that's the program dollars that the feds are paying, to fit into the system.
Yeah. That's the government's priority is to get all these minor agreements made so that when you add them all up together, there's not much left of a self-determination to talk about because you have an agreement with Ottawa covering an umbrella and all your housing needs and then all your infrastructure needs on the reserve. And then you have another agreement
well, that's what
covering...
I'm telling you. You need to look at Budget 2018, the reconciliation chapter.
Okay.
Because they're even saying they want to reconstitute nations and they put $100 million aside to do that. So you have to make a proposal to reconstitute a nation, but it's not what we mean.
No.
It's what they want is they want an aggregate of smaller bands with other bands so that it's cheaper to deliver programs and services because they're looking at the demographic tidal wave coming of youth. And those are the two drivers for the feds all the time is limiting costs and limiting liabilities. Those are the two things that drive everything that they do. And so that's why they're restructuring the government and changing the laws and policies to push this back onto the communities themselves.
Yeah.
And to offload as much as they can onto the provinces. Like what they're doing with the BC Health Authority, right?
Yes, exactly. And ultimately what happens when they get that agreement is it gets devolved down to the provincial level and it becomes something that's implemented and financed by the province. So you completely lose the fiduciary obligation that's attached to...
Well, this is why you need to go back and look at the 1969 white paper and see that the objectives of that are fulfilled now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
even the Land Management Act is to set up a land registry system to, register individual interests, so eventually those can be turned into private property and merged with provincial land tenures.
That's right, and then
the white paper said getting rid of reserves would take several transitory steps, and that's what that Land Management Act is.
Yeah, it was one stage in this process to pry the people off the land and sort of incorporate a First Nation. Then actually becomes a corporation and it becomes a municipality, and it when people accept these agreements, these piecemeal agreements, they don't seem to realize that they are actually going through a democratic process to release their own rights to their own self-determination and to their land, one little piece at a time. Like with the First Nations Land Management Act and the so-called land codes, you read those documents and the language is clear that they accept and they're basically adhering to Canada is what's happening in the language of those documents. They're agreeing that they are governed by Canada and that they're part of Canada. And that is what has never happened.
I've been around this for 30 years, and I've been seeing it, the trend.
Yeah.
And even though I've been talking about this, all these years that this is happening, now I see it culminating in this Recognition Act, and they're going to use their majority parliament to try and ram her through.
And that's why your vision is so important, because you have this long perspective, and I'm really appreciating the way you're putting this and the way you're presenting this, the insight that you have.
Yeah, well, we'll see if I can convince 60% of the Chiefs voters. We have to turn the ship around, as you said.
Well,
the Titanic.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I wish I had $170 billion or whatever it is that Perry's offering everybody. I wish we could find you a source of revenue that you could pull a few more votes your way. Wow.
Well, that's it. It's $350 to get in. And for each proxy, it's $350. So even if I get some proxies coming my way, I got to find somebody to pay for it, because that's what Perry will be doing. He'll be picking up because most of the Chiefs aren't coming to this meeting because they're saying, I can't afford to go to Vancouver. It's too expensive.
You're
but
kidding.
I'll send a proxy. And so that's where the proxies will be bought up and names given, probably by Perry.
Is that right?
So that's how he might win, is by buying up the proxies. Oh, yeah.
So all he has to do is buy people a ticket to Vancouver and a hotel room stay and a few bucks to get into the meeting. Is that right? So you can buy literally just
a few bucks. It's $350.
Well, I $350. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. Wow.
So I mean, what 10? That's what $7,000 for 10 people, something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's more than I've got in my pocket. That's for sure.
Me too.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah. Gosh.
But at least I'm gonna I hope to make it uncomfortable for them. I don't know what I'll do if I win. Well, I do know. I have ideas, but I'll be shocked. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I want to definitely make it as uncomfortable as possible for them about and Trudeau, because I know he's watching. But I'm not going anywhere. So even if I don't win, I will keep fighting.
Well, I'm sure
that platform is what I've been fighting for the last part of my life, anyway.
Yeah.
And I had Art fighting with me, but only in spirit now.
I know. What a loss. I miss him all the time. Yeah.
Well, I went up and paid respects to him today. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah, good. I you know what? It's just occurring to me while we're talking here, Russell. I feel like this has been a really good conversation, and it crossed my mind that I could send the audio to a friend of mine to put on radio. Is that okay with you, or have you said anything that you'd rather not be on there?
No, I don't think I have any problems with anything I said.
No, I
mean,
didn't.
I said I'm talking about the truth, right? Truth before reconciliation.
Yeah, it's not slander if it's true. Yeah, well, okay, well, that would be great. I didn't have that in mind to begin with, but I think that when people can hear the way you talk about it, it'll probably make more sense than reading it. And I'm going to have to do something to try to interpret and quote you and put the story together the way you've told it to me, because it's not a simple story. You can really boil it down and say, look, for example, in the case of Secwepemc or St'át'imc or anyone on the west side of the Rockies, which is what I'm concerned with mainly because this is where I live, you can say, there's no treaty, there's no purchase, we have no constructive arrangement, no legitimate constructive arrangement between this Indigenous nation and Ottawa. And how do you get from that point where you have a people living on their own homeland who comes to this day and age and are so occupied and so slammed by all these procedures and policies that govern
Canada's a racist colonial country.
Yeah.
And a lot of Canadians don't want to admit that.
No, that's true.
But, Colton Bushy, Tina Fontaine, those are all indicators of how racist it really is. And there's a lot more besides that. They're just examples, right?
And sometimes I wonder whether the chicken came before the egg. I mean, I think that when atrocious crimes like that happen, you wonder how much does the colonizer really hate themselves for what they're doing? And again, it comes out in a display, and the only way they can justify their behavior is to dehumanize the other, and that's what they do.
Well, with the Defenders of the Land and Island No More networks, we work with allies, and I think that's what we need to do is separate the more good, progressive Canadians from the racist ones. That's the only way we're going to, because we don't have the numbers to change Canada fundamentally without help.
No.
And that's what we're going to have to do.
Yeah. We are going to have to do that, but I always feel like we've got to look outside as well. And I always compare Canada to South Africa in the 80s.
Oh yeah, me too.
And
me too.
And I feel like we need to get those injunctions, and we need to get those trade boycotts hitting Canada, and the rest of the world is going to have a really important role to play in changing the Canadian state, I think.
Well, and this is why I believe it's the community people we have to get the people power.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the chiefs and councils, and that's why they're so weak, and we're in this situation is they haven't included the people in decision making, and that's got to change. And I've been saying that. I said we got to change our thinking if we want to change our behavior. And when I say we got to change our thinking, I'm talking about our colonial thinking, because we are colonized. It's all about internalizing how do we get the money out of Ottawa.
Instead of how do we get
That's why I talk about program chiefs.
Well, right, and so it's how do we get the money out of Ottawa instead of how do we get our butts back out on the land and make a living and fix things up. That's the big dilemma, right? And people often get trapped in between those, or not being able to do either. So then you have the program chiefs, and then you have the self-determination chiefs, and that's and it's important for people to be able to identify that that's the distinction.
And the numbers of self-determination chiefs are shrinking compared to the program chiefs. I can tell you that. Art talked about the land claim stuff. He says, it's like the flight of the phoenix.
Oh my gosh!
So he described it to me. Remember that movie where they crashed in the desert?
No, I don't know.
They're out there for. Oh yeah, you should watch that movie. It's a good movie. They crash in the desert. They're stuck there, and they're trying to figure out. They're hundreds of miles from anywhere, and they're trying to figure out how to survive and get back to civilization. And so they start to figure out, we can take pieces of the plane and build a smaller one. And so that's what they do. Kind of ruining the movie for you, but
yeah, you did.
That's what.
Spoiler alert.
But that's what Art was describing. The ones who didn't agree with the comprehensive claims policy are shrinking and shrinking.
Yeah. Okay, I get it now.
Describe it like that movie.
They're becoming much smaller. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, look at BC. There's, the nations you name, they probably number about 50 bands compared to the 150 that are in the BCTC process.
Yeah, there's two.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean, and I also know that a lot of while Canada goes into those so-called negotiations in bad faith, I believe that a lot of the Indian bands go into those negotiations with no intention of completing a treaty. They're just broke. They need the money. I kind of feel I'm sure some of those people. That's what's happening. That's what it is.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, is there anything else you want me to try to highlight or focus on in terms of what it is you want to say? And I get it that you're taking this run to have some voice, and I think that's fantastic. And just tell us again what you most want us to know. Pick your top 3.
The top 3?
Sure.
Well, basically that the federal government is implementing a termination plan like they always have been, but this time many of our leaders are being either tricked or going along with it. I guess either knowingly or unknowingly, following the money. And our people don't even know because this is a top-down secret approach. Like I say, the Liberals govern by stealth and deceit. So when they do things, they roll out public relations and communications plans to make it seem like they're helping us, like, nation to nation reconciliation. But even reconciliation, they're rebranding termination as reconciliation. They're trying to cloak it in nice language.
Yeah.
But the intent, and I guess it's to hide the intent
Exactly.
of really what they're trying to do.
I think so.
And then they have a photogenic prime minister, that everybody's fawning over. So when he sprinkles red pixie dust, they're affected by it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. We believe
They believe him.
We believe him because he's cute or something?
Yeah, basically that. A lot of people. But I mean, the purchasing of this Kinder Morgan pipeline, for example, shows that their whole position on implementing the UN Declaration is a fraud.
Yeah, it's totally insincere.
Because,
yeah.
Anybody that doesn't see that. And then, of course, you got chiefs lining up saying, oh, well, we'll accept the equity that's being offered, right?
Yeah, we do.
I mean, no companies are going to touch it, so they will sell it to the Indians. And they're going for it, some of them. The chiefs.
Wow.
But they're not talking about the liabilities. And they're not talking about, the fact that the pipeline, basically, their feds are in a conflict of interest from Alberta right down to Vancouver on the pipeline corridor now, if they follow through with the purchase. Because they're no longer going to be saying it's a corporate issue and they have to resolve it the private sector. It's them, it's the Crown. It's Jody. So when First Nations go to get their injunctions, Jody's going to be on the other side saying, no, this belongs to Canada.
Wow. I'm not sure how that's going to make things clearer, but maybe it is. Maybe that'll be a great opportunity to expose the nature of the relationship between Canada and Indigenous peoples.
Well, I think that's why they recruited her. But good luck. She's going to need the luck to keep her seat, I think.
Yeah.
Given the position of the lower mainland about the pipeline.
I guess
her ridings in Vancouver there.
Well, right, but then maybe they'll just airlift her somewhere else and give her another riding, depending, or they'll they'll give her another job, Russell, just to keep her around and keep her in the photographs, right?
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
She's set for life.
No doubt. Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay, well, that's, crikey, that's quite a lot, isn't it? It's quite a situation we're in here. I just have to sometimes step back and take a deep breath and feel like we got to get out of here somehow. It is like being on the Titanic, and it's like sinking,
Well, like I've been telling people, I said, we're at a crossroads. If this legislation passes and we don't stop it this fall, it will impact on us for generations. And the younger people don't even know this is happening because they haven't been involved. Well, none of us have, because it's been done in secret and top-down approach. And they're doing a national engagement, but that's really bogus because, they're just inviting chiefs to come out. And the chiefs that do come out who are working with them, those are the ones that are trying to say, oh, we met with them. And they're going to tick off the boxes and say, well, we've been to Manitoba, Ontario, all these places, when they announce it in the fall.
And they're going to call that consultation.
I already saw Bennett saying we've had 90 engagement sessions. He said that last Friday. And Perry Bellegarde, I don't know if you saw that, he wrote a letter to Trudeau complaining about Bennett meeting with the premiers behind closed doors to talk about the recognition framework. And he was complaining about the premiers talking about it too in their Council of the Federation meeting, that they'd be talking about this. Meanwhile, he's been having secret meetings for 2.5 years with Trudeau government.
Right.
And he's complaining about Bennett doing that with the premiers. And Trudeau announced it in February. He said, we're going to do a national engagement process, not just with Indigenous peoples, but with the provinces and with industries and with Canadians. So, I don't know why. Kerry's just posturing for the election. That's all he's doing.
Oh, that's what that letter was about. Yeah, trying to sound tough for it, making a show. Huh. Yeah. Gosh. Well, I've kept you up pretty late here tonight. How's your day looking tomorrow? You might go to Lillooet?
Might go to Lillooet.
That'd be
I got
great.
to do an interview with CBC National News, a Skype interview in the morning.
Oh, good. Excellent. Yeah. What? Yeah. What time is that?
8:30, I think they said.
All right. Don't you? But you don't need sleep when you're on the campaign trail, isn't that right?
Well, I got one more week of this, and then I can, hopefully sleep.
Yeah.
But, Laughing Drum APTN asked, what's the first thing you're going to do if you're elected as National Chief? I said, change the locks.
Well, okay. Lock out the feds.
Stop the shredding of documents.
Yeah. Well, I wish you luck, Russell. I really do, and I think that you're achieving your goal anyway, which is to make people aware of what's happening up there.
Well, I was in Calgary doing a public event, and CBC wanted to talk to me, so they had a camera in the hall, and I had to listen to some remote voice from Toronto talking to me in an earphone. I got a kick out of it because of CBC News World. First question they asked me, they said, Mr. Diabo, in the past you've talked about this government having a termination plan. Can you explain that? I'm getting the mainstream media to use that term, so I think I'm fulfilling my objective.
I think you are. That's fantastic. That's exactly right. That's excellent. We've got and you have to put the true words of what they're doing up against all the fake words that they use to describe the termination. This is not recognition.
Yeah, I went through
legislation.
I went through the Recognition Act and said, "Oh, it's a farce."
Yeah,
it's given me a platform to do that. So
that's good. We'll have to think of more platforms if you don't get elected national chief. But there must be some way.
Yeah.
There must be some way to keep your voice out there. I mean, you do a good job of it. You write about it with the First Nations Strategic Bulletin and all kinds of things.
Yeah, I haven't had much time to be writing, though.
No, not
But
recently.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Plus, I had to pivot from being an advisor to a politician, so now I'm making assertions without footnotes.
Yeah, it's the shoe's on the other foot now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope I hope some people will get a chance to listen to you and what you've explained to me this evening, because it's not it's not something you can really fit into a 7-second soundbite, is it?
Well, I think that Georgia Strait article did a pretty good job. He interviewed me.
Yeah, I thought so too. I read through that, and they seem to cover the main points. Yeah, definitely.
He got George and Art mixed up, but other than that,
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
it was fair way because he said Art was head of the World Council of Indigenous Peoples and something else, but that was George.
Yeah.
But he got pretty much what I told him in the interview right, so that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, he did a good job, and I'm glad that they thought to interview you. I'm not sure that the other candidates are getting these kind of interviews, are they?
Maybe after the Georgia Strait. Maybe for Business Vancouver.
I see. Yeah, Business in Vancouver will want to talk to Miles and Perry.
And maybe Sheila.
Oh yeah, I don't know anything about the two women candidates, honestly.
Well, I haven't heard them say much about the Trudeau government. They're mostly talking about what we need to do within our communities to protect children and youth and women.
Uh-huh.
They're important issues, but I'm waiting to hear what they're going to say about the Crown governments that are doing stuff to us, which are contributing to the problems that we're having, to protect our children, youth, and women.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting to hear, but I haven't heard it yet. But the big speech day is Tuesday. That's before the vote, so I guess I'll hear their final pitches as I make mine.
Okay. And you're in Vancouver for a couple of days for that conference then?
Yeah, I'm coming in Sunday and I'm there until Friday.
Right. Yeah. And it's going to take, 3 days of meetings to conduct the elections?
No, well, Monday and Tuesday, I guess, and then Wednesday will be the election.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
And then whether there's any business done or not on Thursday remains, I think, on how divisive the election might be. If it's divisive, then a lot of people don't show up on the last day.
Right.
They leave it to whoever was elected in to clean up the mess.
Yes. Wow. Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah. We'll see. I hope it's not divisive. I hope that there can be some dare I use the word reconciliation among the chiefs.
I have a feeling it's going to be divisive. Because people will be polarized about Trudeau's agenda. He's divided people.
Right.
Just like he's divided people over the pipeline, right?
What makes you say he's divided people over the pipeline?
Well, there's people opposed to it in BC here.
Yes.
But he's also offering equity to certain chiefs in BC, and he's offering 50% equity to the chiefs of Alberta.
I thought you were talking
And it
about
was out
Kerry.
in Calgary last week to do that.
You must be talking about... Who are you talking about right now?
Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Trudeau.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were still talking about the AFN National Chief. Yes, okay, of course he has been divisive. He's...
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's why the AFN election will be divisive, is because he's divided the chiefs.
Over the pipeline issue. Yeah, you're right. Of course, that's going to be a huge issue.
And this Recognition Act.
And this, yeah. Yeah. I don't think Perry has taken a position on responding to the way Trudeau has pushed the pipeline through and made all these offers to different bands.
Perry's response is some First Nations support it, some don't. The Prime Minister should meet with both sides.
Well, that's straightforward.
That's his response. My response is I'm opposed to the expansion of the pipeline and the tar sands.
Yeah.
Everybody else is waffling. They're trying to say what they think the chiefs want to hear.
You know, I've got a question now about this issue of divisiveness. Do you think it's possible that the AFN itself would ever split? Like, imagine if the AFN split into those who want their attention to come back to the land and the people, and between those who want to go and rattle chains in Ottawa.
I've already heard that from chiefs that they're talking about pulling out of AFN. Some have already done it. Through BCR, they said we're not having anything to do with AFN. They don't speak for us.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, the AFN Charter says all First Nations have a right to be members, and so they'll act as if they do.
Okay.
And the government will use AFN